Good evening and welcome to the Jurupa Unified School District Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, February 18th. We'll begin with a roll call, please.
President Schmidt.
Here.
Trustee Mendez.
Here.
Trustee Schaefer.
Here.
Trustee Johnston.
Here.
Trustee Hernandez.
Here.
Daisy Carpio absent. Gabby Saavedra.
I'm her representative.
Thank you. Amanda Gardner.
Here.
So are you Gabby?
No, I'm Ariana. I'm A's secretary.
Okay, so we have another one.
I was thinking
And
she
your name
wasn't
is?
Ariana Lyles.
Look at our lights come.
Thank you, ladies. And Mr. Schaefer, would you lead us in the flag salute tonight, please?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we will start with welcome and of the student board members, Mr. Duchamp.
All right, well, while I have your name right, Ariana, would you tell us about Patriot High School?
Sure. This is just what we have so far. Our blood drive is coming up on February 25th. Our Mr. Patriot is coming soon, so that's February 28th. Our rally is also the same day, and the theme is all around the world. Our spring sports rally is March 21st. Our girls basketball and soccer are undefeated in league, so we're really excited for their CIF games. Soccer is tomorrow at home, and I believe girls basketball is Wednesday at home also. Our boys basketball is third in league, so they're going to CIF also. Our spring sports are still training, and then we're getting ready for our WASP visit. That's in March the 2nd through the 10th, I believe. So we're telling the students what they're gonna do, what they're expecting for us, and then we're just rebuilding the school, so we're repainting everything, so it's going really well. We're offering our FAFSA workshop for our seniors, and then we're preparing for Club Food Week, which is March 11th through the 14th. At this past Valentine's Day, we decorated our hallways with hearts for each of the students, and then our club at CSF and NHS will be traveling to Camino Real for their, they're gonna be reading Dr. Seuss books to the students, and that's all for now.
Thank you. Amanda, Rubidoux High School.
So we just had our winter rally. It was Battle of the Sexes, and it was Fast and Furious themed. That was on February 7th, and we had our midwinter at the Riverside International Auto Museum, and it was a huge success. Everyone loved it. This last Wednesday, the 8th graders from Mission Middle School came to just see what Rubidoux was like and what academic and activities we had there. For sports, 2 of our girl wrestlers made CIF. Girls basketball is going to CIF, and boys and girls soccer are going to CIF. And this past week, some of our girl athletes attended the Women's Athletes Conference. And also, our electronic waste drive has been moved to April 5th. And our winter sports are ending, and our spring sports are starting. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. And next we'll move on to recognitions and recognize Jurupa's 2014 Science and Engineering Fair winners. Mrs. Porter.
Our 28th Annual Science and Engineering Fair was held recently, and we had a record number of projects and a record number of students attending this year. 301 elementary and secondary students were at the fair. The judging took place on February 6th. We had many staff members and community volunteers judging our intermediate and senior projects. And the awards were February 7th. Judges, as I said, included staff and community volunteers, and Mr. Vince Rose from Patriot High School served as the coordinator of that event. We had 28 first place students from the intermediate, junior, and senior divisions who will be entered in the our RIMS, the County Science Fair, which will be held in San Bernardino April 1st and 2nd. And do we have any of our winners here with us today? Any of our student winners? The list of winners is attached.
They're out experimenting.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to all 301 for participating in the science fair this year. Next, we have public verbal comments. Ms. Holcomb? As she's coming up, I want to remind everyone that this is recorded, and the district silence should not be mistaken for agreement, but simply to avoid legal entanglements and or to protect the privacy of situations that may involve lawsuits, employee discipline, or dismissal. And please be assured any serious allegations have been or will be investigated thoroughly, and any responses from the board will take place during the board member comments. Thank you.
We are in negotiations now with NEAJ and CSEA are both negotiating right now for our contracts. You need to keep in mind that we have not gotten a raise since '07, and that was 0.5% raise. In '05, when Jim Owens left the district, Elliot Deshawn told me in a meeting we were having that he gave me his word as a man and as administrator to this district that he would never ask for more than any of the unit members were getting. He has lied tenfold about that because Elliot has gotten raise after raise after raise. Well, we have gotten none. Even the little raises that we do happen to get are well below what our health and welfare benefits have gone up. They have gone up every year, they go up. Me personally, I had to make the choice to get either vision or dental because we couldn't afford both. So I decided to get vision because if my kid loses his teeth, he can get new teeth, but he can't get eyesight. And that is a sad fact, that is a choice I had to make as a mother. Because we never get, we get these little, okay, we're gonna give you 700 to balance it out. It never balances it out. We get 700 and our health and welfare goes up 1,200. The fact that we have not even gotten the cost of living is just ridiculous because the district gets it. Teachers are the heart of this district. Teachers are the ones that teach our kids. They're the ones that make sure that our kids go on to get a higher education. They give everything they got. And for them not to have gotten a raise in all this time is ridiculous. We've given up a lot of money to this district. When negotiations come to your table, you need to consider the fact that we haven't gotten a raise, and the last one we got was 0.5%. While Elliot gets raises for his administration and himself, I mean, I don't know why. When you're getting the enormous amount of money that he's getting, and yes, I've heard it all about he's not getting what other districts are getting or whatever, but he is the superintendent of this school and he is getting an enormous amount of money. And if I had a spouse that was an RN who banked money too, I would be looking out for the people under me. So before you consider giving this man and his staff another raise, look into the fact that classified and certificated have given up a lot and have gotten nothing.
Thank you, Mrs. Holcomb. Are there any other public verbal comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to administrative reports and written communications and report on the chronic student absenteeism. Ms. Garza Gonzalez. Okay, thank you.
Board. My name is Sandra Mattrine, and I work in administrative services, and I'm the child welfare and attendance coordinator there. Tonight I'm going to be reporting on chronic absenteeism. It began with Kamala D. Harris, our Attorney General. She issued a report on chronic absenteeism, and she deemed it a crisis at the elementary level for truancy and chronic absenteeism. So we began by identifying which of our students in kindergarten through 11th grade experienced chronic absenteeism for the 2012-2013 school year. From there, we identified our students in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way up to 11th, and we began having parent meetings beginning with our kindergarten students. When we met with the parents whose students experienced chronic absenteeism, we defined the terms, and the definitions are chronic absenteeism is missing 10% or more of this school year in an academic year for any reason, excused or unexcused. We then state that when you see 90%, you usually think of that as a very good grade, like when you get a 90% on a math test or a spelling test. But when you come to school 90% of the time, it's chronic because you've missed 10% or a month of school. So we're setting goals, trying to achieve 95% or missing 5%, the equivalent of 9 days or less in a school year. We review data, and when you look at kindergarten, it is very important. Students who miss 3 to 6% do much better in reading and math and in general knowledge as opposed to the students who miss 10% or a month of school. We also look at our students who are missing 10%. Research shows that students who miss 10% in kindergarten and in first grade, when they reach third grade, only 17% of those students will be reading at grade level. Students who miss 5% or 9 days or less in kindergarten and in first grade, 64% of those students will be reading at grade level. Sixth grade students' attendance also impacts graduation and dropout rates. Students who miss a month of school in the sixth grade are at risk to drop out, to have a 41.6% chance of dropping out of school. And students who miss 2 months of school or 36 days of school it increases to a 56% chance of dropping out of school. In ninth grade, if you attend or only miss 0 to 4 days semester 1 and only miss 0 to 4 days in semester 2, you have an 87% chance or 90% chance of graduating from high school. You can see you start missing 5 to 9 days semester 1, 5 to 9 days semester 2, it drops to 63, and when you miss 10 to 14, it drops to 41. We end the meeting by setting goals. We look and review. This was a sample that was done in October with one of our first grade parents whose student experienced chronic absenteeism in kinder. They attended 157 days. They were absent 18 for an 89% attendance rate. Currently, when we met with them, there had been 65 days of school. They had missed 6 days, so that was a 91%. We're increasing from the 89 from the previous year by 6% to reach 95% for this school year. So we tell the parents that we're starting from the very first day of school, which was August 7th, and we're setting our goal to the very last day, which is May 30th for our elementary students. And we look at absenteeism for 180 days. So if you miss 6 days and stay at 6 days, 96.6, but that's not realistic since this meeting was in October. So then we say if you missed 7, it would drop to 96. If you missed 8, attended 172, you would be missing 95% or achieving 95%, and missing 9 would get you to 95, and increases from the previous year. And we end by saying, based on our crisis that we see at the elementary level, getting good habits at the elementary level is where we need to put our emphasis, and it helps all our students achieve what our end goal is, graduation. So that's all I have. If you have any questions for me.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, what are some of your tools that you utilize to get these kids to come back to school and not to miss?
Some of the things we talked about is that the state of California does recognize that there are students who have health issues and chronic absenteeism, so parents were made aware of that. And if that were the case, then I would email the school nurse. We talk about the RNs that are assigned to the different elementary schools, and I would email them. Also, we shared information if the parents said to us that their child was experiencing asthma. We give them an information sheet that they can call, and they can have someone come to their home. And so different things like that. And we talk about an asthma plan. We talk about a medical release form. We talk about anything that can improve from last year to this year. There were a lot of students who have actually improved, very much so, this school year. Altogether, when you look at that first chart, it's kind of misleading because it'll show you the number of students that we got the data from, but then when we emailed the RNs and said, please review this list, we're going to be meeting with students who are currently in first, please review the list, and if there are any students who have health issues or chronic, then the list drops. So the actual number of students that we're missing or we're meeting with is different. But so far we've invited 236 parents from kindergarten, first and second, and we've met with 114. So we're meeting with about 48%. And our goal is to meet with all the elementary students whose students experienced chronic absenteeism last year. And we're on grade 4.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez.
I was just wondering, do you have any data in terms of why these students were missing so much school? What were some of the reasons?
It's very varied. Like sometimes the parents would say, there was just different. Sometimes the child had surgery and maybe it wasn't listed, or the health clerk reviewed, or the RN wasn't made aware, or sometimes they would have an illness that just kind of exceeded, or they'd be right on the cusp. Just different reasons. But then when they're kind of shown the research, and it's kind of, we start out by saying, this is from last year, there's not really anything we can change about it, but this year it's an awareness and information and setting goals to do better.
Did you, in looking into that, did you find any that were not coming to school because they were afraid for some reason, maybe bullying or intimidated or made fun of, or any negative circumstance in the school that was brought up at any time?
No, with the parents that I've met, I didn't get those reasons. Just like, a lot of colds or an immune system, or they had strep throat, or they had stitches, or part of it sometimes maybe they went on independent study and we weren't made aware of it, or they just had a bad year.
That's really, I'm glad to hear that, because I've done some reading in some other parts of the country where it seems that there is a not tremendous number of people, students maybe, but some number of students that report not wanting to come to school for those reasons, and that speaks well for our teachers in our school and our campuses, and that they feel welcome in our schools and don't feel any negative results, from being at our school. So that's really good to hear. Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer?
On that chronic absenteeism sheet, for example, it says Camino Real, 740 students enrolled, 37 total chronic absences by site. Is that absences per student, or is that the number of students that were absent?
I have to go backwards, sorry. Okay, can you ask me again? Sorry, I didn't have the data in front of me.
For example, Camino Real, total students enrolled is 740. That 37, that figure of 37, is that absences or the number of students?
That's the number of students who
So
experienced chronic absenteeism at that school.
Okay.
For the 2012-2013 school year.
Thank you.
What's been said to parents about the absences? I think it's appalling when you have, Glen Avon, 9.8% of the student body there is absent chronically. Parents have to realize that the child's education is important. If they don't feel that it's that important, then they aren't, making sure that the kid goes to school, whether it has a stomach ache or not.
A lot of times that we share with parents too is one good practice is to, we, of course, if you have 100 degree temperature or more, we don't want you at school. If you're experiencing vomiting or diarrhea, we don't want you at school. But any other reason, take the child to school and then let the school say the child's not well enough to stay at school. And that's a good habit and a good practice to get into, because otherwise you could cave in, and that's kind of, and I think what we're sharing with parents is some people, we don't realize, and I think information and awareness, and those are my two key words, parents, information and awareness, and setting goals to do better. And once they see the information of how this can impact kindergarten, absences in PAC's first grade, kindergarten, and first grade. If we continued, we'd impact third, sixth grade, so it just kind of builds. And I think once you get the awareness and information, you know what's that saying? When you know better, you do better.
Just one more
And
question.
I didn't put it in here, but we got to give a lot of our parents an outstanding certificate with the student's name. And I tell the parents, you know, since your child's little, I feel like putting your name on this too. And excellent. Some of our students really are doing very, very well this year. So I hope to see that number go very, you know, a lot lower for next year.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez?
Yes, so you're saying it's okay to send a kid to school then and let the nurse decide if they're sick enough to stay home?
If mom's waiting, kind of like, you know, getting kind of like, you know, as a parent, if you're the parent, you're in charge of your child, you know what's best for your child. But if your child's kind of giving you the business, and as a mom you're caving in a little bit, and you can say to your child, you know, let me take you to school, and I'll let the school know that you're not feeling good, you're a little bit, you know, but you're well enough to come, and if there's any problem, then they'll give me a call.
Then in your opinion, then what is the best thing that we can do in our community, not just parents, but the total community, to help try to resolve some of these problems?
I think just giving out information and awareness, and we send every week to our schools a weekly report of any student who has 3 unexcused absences or more, so our schools are getting that information out to parents. We also send a monthly report to our schools with anyone who's missing 5 days or more consecutively, and every increments of like 60 days, 90, 120, 150, 180, we're sending the schools a report so they'll know who's experiencing 10% at that point in time.
I
So
would
that
think
will
at some
keep
point
track.
you should meet with parents. I think you should select a benchmark and say that if a child's missed 10 or 15 days in the school year, that maybe you should talk to the parents. Maybe you should have a parent meeting, because this is appalling to me. You have an Indian Hills school, 50 absences. It's pushing on, 8.14% chronically absent. I think you need to do a little more than that. Sending papers home isn't certainly not getting read. What about calling the parent and setting up a meeting?
She is meeting with the parents.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer for that?
Did I explain to you? I don't know, maybe I didn't explain myself clearly. I have been meeting with parents. We've met with the kindergarten parents who are in first grade this year, whose students missed 10% or more. Then we met with the first grade parents whose kids are now in second grade, who've missed 10% or more. We've met with the third grade parents whose students missed 10% or more, and now we're on the fourth grade, and we're going to keep going all the way until we get to the sixth.
And do you see improvement after you meet with the parents?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you see improvement in the absentee?
At that point in time, comparing from last year to the point in time when I'm meeting with them, yes. Yes, very much so.
Also, I think where Ms. Amatrian, also the next step is, with chronic absenteeism, if the parents are not responsive to this either sort of positive or suggesting response, we SAR parents, and they go before the review board, and ultimately they can go to mediation in front of the DA. I want to say that there are a certain number of students where unfortunately they do not get the family support, or the family really doesn't care that much, or is dysfunctional and doesn't attend to sending the student to school. And they're, you know, we can go so far, we use all the legal tools we can, but we can't go to the house and extract the child and bring them to school. Maybe we could, I don't know. We could try. No, don't do that. And when Sandy is, Ms. Amatrian's telling the parents, you know, that to send the kids to school if they're wavering, this isn't advice given to all parents. She's talking only with those parents who I think have been told a number of times by their kids they have a stomach ache and they want to stay home, most parents are sending their kids to school every day and pretty diligently. Our overall district attendance rates are very high. They're running 96, 97%, which is extremely high for a unified district. So this report is kind of the darkest side of attendance. So please don't think that this is, we want every student to be there. You can't learn when you're not in school, but generally those statistics are very, very concerning, that students that miss a large number of days in school tend to be those who drop out, who get expelled, who don't go to college. I mean, they're very alarming. So Ms. Amatrian's working with the worst offenders, and we try to catch the other ones earlier.
I would say that you make sure that the parent is getting the information. That if you're sending something, there should be a telephone call to confirm and connect with the parent to make sure they got the information. Because I got personal experience with that. I had one of mine skipping school, and I had no idea. There was messages on my message machine. They were cleared off by the time I got home. I had no clue. And I never heard, and you know what? They knew where I was. They could have found me if they wanted to. And nobody let me know. So, I mean, I think the schools have responsibility, and they need to make sure that parents are notified.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer.
Am I correct in, what is the loss of ADA here? Is it $400,000, $500,000? If I'm looking at these numbers right?
The actual loss, because it's an average daily attendance for over the entire school year, so we'd have to look at that to see. I mean, our attendance, as Mr. DeShawn said, our attendance percentage is quite high, and that's the percentage we use to calculate our average daily attendance.
But still looking at this 1147, that adds up to a substantial amount of lost ADA. And yes, there are families that unfortunately don't care about their child's education, but then there's those children in those households, they want their education, even though their parents are not interested in getting them to school. With that lost ADA, contacting those parents or trying to intercede in a positive way so that to find out what really is going on. It's like Trustee Johnson said, she didn't know as a parent. Are we actually contacting those parents, letting them know your child was not there, and getting a response from that parent? I mean, how far do we go as a district?
Yes.
Can we go?
Yes, the attendance clerks call every day when students are not at school, and there's night callers as well who call every night when students are not at school.
I want to reiterate here, because I think when you get to the point where you're dealing with chronic absenteeism, we're not relying on an attendance clerk to call. A letter goes home. Ultimately, if there's no response, they're going to be referred to the DA. I mean, at some point when we can't mitigate with kind of a friendly, helpful response, we go to SARP. So when Ms. Amatrian comes in, it's because there is chronic absenteeism. There are a number of days missed. I don't think we can take these numbers necessarily. We need other numbers. These are the numbers of kids that have chronic absentee problems. They don't translate into a number of minutes per ADA per school. So I don't know that we have, it could be, it probably isn't 400,000, but it's a substantial number. Our real concern is that the kids need to be in school. But when it gets to Ms. Amatrian, to Ms. Garza-Gonzalez, we're dealing with being very assertive with parents about, for her, their parents are called into a meeting. And I've been to those meetings, and they're told at that meeting that if they don't show up and sign up, that they're going to be SARBed, and they're going to be called into mediation by the DA. So, we move from a gentle helping hand to a kind of pulling, tugging hand to a very strong hand if the parents, because chronic absenteeism is a parent problem. It really is not a student problem, if that makes sense. And, parents who are involved make sure their kids get to school. The child is not well enough to get to school, they put them in home and hospital. There are many alternatives. So we're dealing with the most extreme end on this particular report. So.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe when there is a chronic illness, a lot of times staff from the school will attempt a home visit to make contact with the parent before any of this other takes place. And the best thing that a parent could do in this day and age is give their cell phone number, because when it's on your person, it's a lot harder for the kids to erase an answering machine or beat the parent to the mailbox. So a lot of it does depend on the parents outwitting the kids, which is hard to do in this day and age.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. All right, next we will move to the issuance of remaining 2013-2014 tax revenue anticipatory notes or trans. Mrs. Ford.
As you know, due to the amount of state revenue being deferred in the past few years, the districts needed to issue tax revenue anticipation notes, otherwise known as trans. And that's to ensure that the district's able to meet its cash obligations. While the governor's budget proposal I mentioned a few weeks ago for 14-15 eliminates state deferrals, the state revenues continue to be deferred for the 2013-14 school year. So earlier in the year, the board approved a trans for $38 million. So far, we've used approximately $19 million of that, with over $18 million available. And based on our current cash flow projections, we will need to issue an additional $10 million to cover the anticipated 2013-14 shortfalls. So all trans, as a reminder, all trans have to be repaid within 1 year. And this item is just information only to let you know that we are taking that additional trans out.
And Ms. Ford, could you explain that the shortfall isn't that we don't have the money, it's that the state and the federal government have not given us the money that is due us?
Yes, so we have revenue, so much revenue that's coming in. We're told by the state that we'll get X amount of revenue per year. Typically, they would be giving us that on a regular basis, so every month we would see some of that revenue come in so that we can meet our cash obligations like payroll. However, with the state deferrals, what they've done is they've said, well, we'll give you so much this month, but then we're not going to give you any more for the next 3 months, as an example. And so in order to continue to meet our cash obligations, we need to borrow and then pay the interest on that borrowed money. So, that help?
Thank you very much. Item C is status of bid number 13-1409 TE, the E-rate year 17, 2014-2015 priority 2-year project video on demand. Mrs. Ford.
On September 3rd, the board approved filing of the E-rate year 17, and then on November 4th, the board authorized the district to solicit bids. Staff did solicit bids for various projects, and one of those was video on demand. The video on demand bids were due February 11th. However, no bids at all were received. So this item is information only, so we will not be taking that forward for year 17 either.
Thank you. And item D is to cast the ballot for the 2014 California School Boards Association Delegate Assembly election. Mr. Duchamp.
Thank you, President Schmidt. Well, it is politics time. And in your supplementary materials, you'll note there is a ballot from CSBA. You have 6 votes as a board. You vote as a board as a whole, and there are 8 people running. So you need somehow to come up with consensus on, 9 people running. I can't count. I don't know why I was thinking 8. So of the 6 that you wish to vote for, you don't have to vote for 6, but you can't vote for more than 6. I will turn it over to the Jurupa caucus and let you decide.
Thank you. And Mr. Mendez, since you deal with most of these people that are on the nomination, it's in tab 4D is where the ballot is.
I kept
Do you-
skipping over it. Yes,
That's okay.
I kept skipping over it as I was
Is
looking
there
for it here.
anything you can,
Yes,
tell us?
I'd like to make some suggestions here for the board to consider. Some of these are currently serving as delegates, one being Jerry Bowman, who used to actually be a teacher here in the district a while back. Stanley Crippen is also a current serving member. Thomas Elliott is a current member, and so is Ben Johnson. And so I would recommend definitely those four to be considered for recommended to be nominated. And then in addition to that, I would also recommend Raymond Sawyer from Val Verde and Victor Scavatra from Hammond Unified. Those would be the six people that I would recommend. And they have their bios in here in terms of information that the board can take a look at.
is there anyone else that has any?
I
Ms.
read
Johnson?
all the statements, and the one I picked, I looked at Ben Johnson, but I picked Susan Scott based on what I read, so if you wish to consider that, that's my pick, but all the others I had down.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez?
Are you looking for a motion, or are you looking for recommendations only?
Either or. Whatever your pleasure
I'd
is.
like to move to approve the recommendation of Mr. Mendez, since he has had intense experience with these individuals.
I don't know about any experience, but
May I ask a question of one of the candidates?
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I made a motion. Is there a second to that?
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second before we take questions?
I'll second so we can take
Okay,
questions.
we have a motion by Mr. Hernandez, a second by Mr. Mendez. Mr. Schaefer, your question?
I concur with Mr. Mendez, except for Susan Scott would be an ideal candidate from her bio. I wonder what Mr. Mendez had any knowledge of Mrs. Scott.
I don't have first-hand knowledge, so I would be comfortable with substituting her for either Raymond or Victor, if that's the pleasure of the board.
It adds a woman to the mix.
That too.
Mr. Hernandez, are you?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
I think the thing is that Mr. Mendez, again, has experience with these individuals over that organization at least more than I've ever had been. So he would know who would have some basic knowledge. I think the thing is that it doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man, as long as we're given an opportunity to go ahead and just get people on there to represent us.
All right, since you put the motion forward, would you read off the names that you would like to correct it to, please?
Okay, well.
Mr. Hernandez.
Let him go ahead and do it.
Okay, no problem.
Well, as I mentioned, her bio does look impressive, and so I would make the recommendation, but I wouldn't know which one of the other two to substitute Susan Scott for either Victor or Raymond.
I would suggest that I had looked at all of them, I would pick Susan Scott over Ben Johnson, but you probably personally know him and I do not. So.
Yes, I do, and he's a strong candidate. He does a good job with the CSBA.
Who would you recommend Mr. Mendez to so Susan could get on the
I would say to go with also then Marla Kirkland, because the only reason I say that is that Hammond Unified had a representative for many years on CSBA, and this will give another district an opportunity to have someone from their area to serve. So that would be my recommendation.
All right, so Mr. Hernandez, do you amend your motion to be Jerry Bowman, Stanley Crippen, Thomas Elliott, Ben Johnson, Marla Kirkland, and Susan Scott?
That sounds good to me.
And second by Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Or I guess we
You can
don't.
do it. You can do
Okay.
it.
Opposed? All right. So we will send that off to CSBA as our recommendations. Thank you all.
We will send a copy to Iowa for their caucuses so they can take a lesson from you.
All right, and next is to announce location for the site of the district for the district teacher of the year ceremony. Mr. Duchan.
You had the hard part, I have the easy part. March 17th at Patriot High School, it's the Stacy A. Del Roca Performing Arts Theater will be our exciting evening.
Thank you, and that will be the next board meeting because there's not, the first Monday in March, there is not a meeting. All right, any other administrative reports or written communications?
There are none.
Thank you. Next, we will move into the action session, and I need a motion to approve routine action items by consent, items A, 1 through 17.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mr. Hernandez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item B is to award of bid number 13 through -1406 TE, the E-rate year 17, 2014-2015 priority 2 project, the wireless access and density at 16 district sites. Mrs. Ford.
If I can get my mic back in. Is it working? Okay,
Yes.
I unplugged it, so. On November 4th, the board authorized staff to solicit bids for services and equipment needed for the E-rate year 17. Staff solicited bids to increase the level of density of wireless access at 16 sites. And they are Jurupa Valley, Rubidoux, Miraloma, Mission, Jurupa Middle, Glen Avon, Granite Hill, Ina, Mission, Bell, Pacific Avenue, Pedley, Rustic Lane, Sunny Slope, Troth, Van Buren, and West Riverside Elementary Schools. Bids were submitted and opened on February 11th, and the results were one bidder, which was Vector USA for $4,828,613.12. The project is contingent upon receipt of E-rate grant funds and availability of district matching funds. And approximately 85 to 90% of the project will be funded through the year 17 E-rate grant, and the remaining 10 to 15% would be funded through district match. Administration is recommending the board award bid number 13-14-06 TE, award of bid number 13-14-06 TE, E-rate year 17, 2014-15, priority 2 project for wireless access and density at 16 district sites to Vector USA in the amount of $4,828,613.12.
Move for approval of question.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Mendez and a second by Mrs. Johnston. Mr. Mendez, your question.
I was just wondering if you had any insight as to why we only received one bid for this project.
Yes, we did. Actually, Mrs. Devlin contacted each of the other companies that came to the job walk, and there were, for this particular project, there were 9 companies that came to the job walk. And when she contacted them, there were various reasons from that they had maxed out their bonding capacity, so they weren't able to bond this degree of a project, this amount of a project, to they're a design firm, and so they weren't contracted to be able to bid. They couldn't bid this particular project. One of them, it was outside their typical scope of work. Another one was that they do not, the district standard is Aruba for wireless, and they were not able to meet that standard, so they're not an Aruba installer. And then we had one that planned to be a subcontractor for one of the bidders, but then that particular person didn't bid because of the bonding capacity. So,
When we get a bid like this, I guess we have both well, first of all, we need to get the job done, right? So we got to hire somebody. But I would imagine we have sort of a range within which you think it's a reasonable amount to expect the bidders to submit. Is that,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, what is our matching?
Our matching for this, we're anticipating that it would be funded at the 90%. So we would have the $480,000 that we would need to match. But then in addition to that, there are always some ineligible costs that we have to take out of district funds. So we would have some ineligibles too, which usually for a project this size, it usually ranges between $200,000 and $400,000.
Oh, that's nice. Let me ask you a question then. Is it always our matching 10%?
Not always. There are times where our match will be more. It just depends on what USAC funds it at.
Thank you.
Mr. Schaefer. This issue has come up a number of times as far as when only there is one bidder, especially when it comes to Vector. Vector, the perception out in the industry is that Vector is a favored vendor of this district. And the other vendors do not want to spend the time, the money, and the effort to put together a package because of that perception. There were the bids that Vector have successfully gotten from this district. The reason the other vendors did not get it is because they were, if you look at them all, they were disqualified for not adhering to the specs of the project. And I had mentioned to Mr. Gill, predecessor to Mrs. Ford, that we need to reach out on these E-rate projects to get the best bid. Vector was $3 or $4 million over on a bid 2 years ago where there were 3 or 4 bidders. And all of those bidders were disqualified because of not adhering to the specs. So we have to reach out to those vendors and let them know that, or find out how can we bring them back to the bidding process, because when a vendor feels that they are the favored vendor, they get fat, lazy, and sassy. And we do not know if this bid or the next bid, which is a Vector bid, and only one bidder again, how do we know that we couldn't get a better deal on this project, cost-wise? And I know there's, we've gone through this before, but this is not, my vote will reflect not the fact that we need this project, but that we have failed in bringing into the district in the last 2 years, reaching out to vendors. That may not be our job, but we're not sitting pretty financially. We need to save as much money on these projects as possible, and they're costing our students technology, the needs in technology that we can't afford to award these bids if they're overbid, and we don't know if they're overbid because we've got one bidder. So we need to not just send letters out there. I understand, Paula, that you have sent letters inviting or letting them know about these bids, but we need to maybe a face-to-face contact, a telephone call to these people, tell them we've got new management. It's like a new restaurant. We have under new management. Come on in and help them through this process if we have to. You may not think that's our job, but when it comes down to these bids, the one bid that stands out the most, Vector was $3 or $4 million overbid from the next vendor, and they got the bid. Well, that's $3 or $4 million. That may not be a lot to some people, but to this district, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of IT projects for this district. So my bid will reflect the fact, I guess I'm dissatisfied with the districts reaching out to these vendors, but we do need, I'm in support of what the project covers.
May I respond? Because I know you have a question, Mr. Hernandez, but I think there's two things on the table that you've been critical of. One was the district and one is a vector. The district has done extreme due diligence with this. These are the most highly regulated bids this district lets. They are under USAC. They're part of the Telecommunications Act. We have to satisfy USAC. We're audited by USAC. The costs under the bid are audited by USAC. Anything that we do is both audited, and we will be charged back if it's not right. If we get in the business of helping bidders write their bids, that's unfair competition. We need to be very cautious in terms of reaching out, because then Vector would have an improper business really contention against us. E-rate is very large. It's nationwide. There are, as Mrs. Ford mentioned earlier, many companies do not have the bonding capacity or the capacity to do this level of work. So far, our bids have not been audited negatively by USAC, and they fall within the realm of standard industry. Most of the items in the work are either commodities or standard rates for materials and labor. So they are scrutinized. I understand there may be a perception, but we have not been officially approached by any vendor. And I know we covered this a couple years ago, and that's why I stepped in, because you weren't in the seat at that time. But when those bids were disqualified, they were disqualified on the advice of counsel that if we accepted them, they were improper bids. And again, no more than we could go to a construction company and tell them how to bid. And again, there's a difference between a walkthrough and what forms need to be submitted or helping companies with their bids. Vector is in probably, I don't know, half the school districts in this county, and to my knowledge, they've had no concerns with their bids. So I understand they're high. It's a lot of money. In this case, I also the board needs to be aware that we're under a timeline, and that if we don't have to, the E-rate is very funny. It's very different than everything else. So I think we need to, my recommendation, I understand your concern about the bids, and that Vector's name comes up prominently. There was another local competitor several years ago. They're out of business now. It's just not a big business that a lot of companies are in. So.
And one thing to mention is that there's other districts that are in the same situation where they have one bid for projects of this scope. Smaller projects might get additional bids, but for a project of this scope, it's not atypical to get one bid. And in this area, quite often it is Vector.
Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, I was just listening to Mr. Schaefer's concerns, and I think one of the things that just popped into my head is that then if the standards are too high, do you wish to lower the standards? I don't know. I think the thing is that as Mr. Elliott explained to us, it's within the parameters of what the law states, and we check everything. So I'm looking at that, but and I had this talk earlier with Ms. Ford, and I had a concern about the bid, and she said this is the way, and the mechanism of ERAD is quite unique, and if you don't do certain things, then people, if you don't measure up to their standard, then and have the money to go ahead and go through with the bid, because if the project's not funded, there are thousands upon thousands of dollars that are lost by that individual. So, I guess my concern is that we can always look at redoing the standards and maybe lower them. That way other people can go ahead and bid on it.
Well, I think that I wouldn't be in favor of lowering any standards, but I think that if you don't get the number of beds that you were looking for, or a minimum number of beds, you can always extend the time. And I know that even if you extend the time, you may not get any more beds, but at least you made that up here. And I find Mrs. Ford has been really watchful of the district's money, and I think that she's been, as far as I've seen, she's been very wise. So that's my comment.
Just one thing to mention about the time with E-rate. E-rate, as Mr. Duchamp mentioned, is really a unique program. And the timing of E-rate is always on a very, very strict timeline. You have a 28-day window that you have to abide by. You have to do, multiple advertisements. You have to make sure that things are posted at a certain time, and there's a certain percentage of time involved in that. So there's always a tight timeline for E-rate, and you just have to be aware of that when you go through. So for an example, as of now, we would have to have an entire special meeting if we were not, going to take these bids in order to make sure that we met that March 26th timeline.
Yeah. No one is talking about lowering the specs, and no one is talking about helping other bidders rate their bids. This is reaching out because the perception is there from vendors. There was one that spoke a year and a half ago. It was in January of, I think, 2011, 12, concerning, there were 4 bids on that E-rate project. They were all disqualified. Maybe it is the specs, but no one's asking the district to take, to lower their standards. What are the standards with other school districts, and what are the standards? I guess ITS writes the specs for us.
They do.
And they write them for other school districts?
They do.
Besides Vector, what other vendors are out there doing this type of work? And why are they not bidding? That's all I'm asking. I'm just looking to open up the field so that this district gets its best bang for its buck. That's all I'm looking for. Thank you.
Understandable.
Ms. Ford, could you kind of do a poll in like the local county areas of what companies are doing the E-rate other than Vector? If there are any, it may be that Vector is the only one in this area, and maybe we can find out why, if there are other ones, why they're not coming into this area.
We can definitely do that. I know a lot of the districts are still in the process of their 28-day window for this particular E-rate season, year 17. So once they've completed that window, I will be able to get that information.
Thank you.
You mentioned that, if I heard correctly, that some of the vendors were not able to maybe even submit a bid because they had maxed out their bonding capacity. Is that what you said?
Yes.
What does that mean?
That
Because
means,
they allocated on a certain amount of...
right, and Mrs. Devlin may be able to explain it better than me, but I'm going to give it a shot. She'll correct me if I'm wrong. But it basically means that they have to have so much bonding to secure that they'll be able to complete the project and not default on the project, and it's a percentage of the actual dollar amount of the project and scope of the work. So if they don't have enough, if they're already maybe doing 2 or 3 other projects, they don't have enough on their bond to be able to basically say, yes, I can take that in additional security onto this bond.
And what were the number of vendors that were unable to submit a bid due to that criteria?
Well, there were 9 vendors that came for this particular job walk for the 16 school sites that we just mentioned. And there was only one that said they maxed out bonding capacity and could not secure a bond. There was one that said it was outside of their typical scope of work. There was one that said they were a design firm and not a contractor, so they couldn't bid it. There was another one that said they were working on too many other bids at the same time, and they just didn't have the manpower to bid the project. There was one that we left a message, but the owner never responded. There was another one that there was no response. There was another one that said the district standard is Aruba, and they're not certified to install Aruba. And then there was another one that received notification of the bid from one of their manufacturing partners, so they were going to be a subcontractor for that particular bidder, but that bidder is the one who maxed out their bonding capacity.
Thank you.
So those were all the reasons.
Thank you.
Thank you. All of our questions answered. Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend to award the bid number 13-1406 TE bid 13-1406 for E-rate year 17 2014-15 priority 2 project wireless access and density at 16 district sites to Vector USA in the amount of $4,828,613.12.
So moved.
Second.
We've already got a motion and a second. I'm looking for the vote, but thank you.
We've been talking all along. Yeah.
I had to ask too, so I'm right there with you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Item C, award of bid number 13-1407 TE E-rate year 17 2014-15 priority 2 project network infrastructure upgrades and wireless access at 8 district sites. Mrs.
Move
Ford.
to approve.
Have a motion from Mr. Hernandez
Second.
and a second from Mr. Mendez. Any questions or comments? Mr. Hernandez, is yours on for a question or? Thank you.
I'm asleep. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, no questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Item D, award of bid number 13-1408 TE E-rate year 17 2014-15 priority 2 project core switch. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mr. Hernandez. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item E, award of bid number 13-14-10 TE E-rate year 17 2014-2015 priority 1 project fiber internet services with connection to RCOE. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve bid number 13-14-10 TE.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mrs. Johnson. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item F, award of bid number 13-14-11 TE E-rate year 17 2014-15 priority 1 project cellular and related data services. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve bid number 13-14-11 TE.
Have a motion from Mr. Schaefer
I'll second.
and a second from Mr. Mendez. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item G, approve termination of existing lease and execution of new lease for copiers and related equipment for district print shop. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve the termination of existing lease and
Second.
execution of new lease.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Schaefer and a second from Mr. Mendez. Any questions or comments? Mr. Schaefer.
I just want to clarify, there is no termination fee on the existing contract, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item H, approve lease purchase of food services truck. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve the lease purchase of a food services truck.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mr. Mendez. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item I, authorize issuance of 2012-13 school accountability report cards, Sarcs. Ms. Marino.
Local boards are required to issue school accountability report cards annually for every school in the school district. The Sarc reports contain information about the prior year, so these Sarcs are actually 12-13 school year Sarcs that include student achievement, enrollment, expenditure, class size reduction, textbook and instructional materials, data in them. The Sarcs are made available upon request of parents, and they're currently being reported on our website, and so they're posted there in both English and Spanish. Administration recommends that the board authorize the issuance of the 12-13 school accountability report cards.
Thank you.
Make motion to approve the question.
I have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mr. Mendez. Mr. Schaefer, your question.
These Sarcs will continue on even though now we're phasing into Common Core. We'll continue with that, with these Sarcs.
They're required even under local control. They're still required, just like school plans. Sarcs are required as well. They're a state requirement.
Thank you.
Do you know how useful these are to people? Do people actually really look these up on the website? I mean, how many hits do you get on these?
Every so often they'll request them, but all the schools are aware that they're on there too, so parents come and request a copy of the Sarc. It's very easy for them just to run a copy of them off of the website, but I don't believe there's something that
Not in high demand.
Actively sought after very often.
Thank you.
They're great reading.
All right, any other questions or comments? All those in favor of authorizing the issuance of the 12-13 school accountability report cards, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item J, approve instructional materials for review. Mrs. Marino.
Mooney is out ill tonight, so I'm going to take this over, but I may butcher
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion for Mr. Mendez and a second by Mr. Hernandez. Any questions or comments?
I can make a comment.
Yes.
I did come in and look at the books. And although I'm not fluent in Spanish and I know a little bit, I brought my own interpreter. And I gotta say they're awesome. And especially the one about literature and history. I could read enough and tell enough a bit about it. And some of the authors that were featured in there, Harvard grads, and there was a poet, and anyway, I just thought they were awesome. And it's AP, it's not honors. So you're going to read that. There's no English in that one, and you're going to have to read and understand it. So it really is an advanced book.
And they're up there for view, up on the second floor. That's where you went, Donna, right? Upstairs.
Yeah, I believe they will come for final approval
Right, they'll come to the
in
next
March.
board meeting for final approval.
So you can still read them. Actually, you can read them after you decide whether
Or
to
not
approve them or not.
All right, all those in favor of approving for review instruction materials, Timas, AP, Spanish language and culture, and the go ahead, memo. Anthology and Guide to the AP Spanish Literature Course, 2nd edition. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item K, adopt at a second reading revised board bylaw 9251, District Group Insurance Programs, Board of Education. Mrs. Ford.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Schaefer and a second by Mr. Mendez. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item L, act on student discipline cases. We have one revoked expulsion case, 13-036.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Mendez and a second by Mr. Schaefer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Expulsion agreement and stipulation, we have one case, 14-031.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Mendez and a second by Mr. Schaefer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Expulsion, suspended expulsion cases, agreement and stipulation, we have two. Case 14-028 and 14-030.
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion by Mr. Mendez, a second by Mr. Schaefer. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item N, approved personnel matters. We do have an item to report out from closed session.
Yes, we do. We need to report out that the board voted by a 5-0 vote to accept the resignation of Esteban Lizarraga, our principal at Rustic Lane. And we will certainly miss him. He's a great guy, and wish him all the best as he pursues his career goals. Then we have our personnel report. Administration recommends the board approve personnel report number 13 as printed.
So move.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Mr. Hernandez and a second by Mr. Mendez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item 2, adopted a second reading, new board policy and regulation 4212.42, drug and alcohol testing for drivers.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Mendez and a second by Mr. Hernandez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And item N, board member comments and committee reports. Mr. Mendez, we'll start with you tonight.
Not much. I'm looking forward to the Teacher of the Year ceremony at our next meeting. It's always a nice thing to see our folks recognized, so looking forward to that.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer?
I'd like to congratulate all the science and engineer fair winners. I have a question. I had a number of parents call me. They saw in the Riverside Press Enterprise an article on Chrome, Google Chrome tablets, books, and the price tags was around $300-400, and we spoke about it. If you could explain to my colleagues about those Chrome tablets, I would appreciate it. Then I'll finish.
Okay. One of the things when I was talking to Mr. Schaefer that we talked about was that the Google Chromebooks actually have limited capacity. So while I don't want to say that we would never have them in the district, because I think it's very viable that at some point we would have those in the district, just as any other type of device, because I think we'll end up having multiple devices, a variety of devices that are available. They are limited to the Google apps, so they don't run Microsoft Office. The other component is that you can't save anything to them, and they have to be connected to the web at all times. So if for some reason you're offline, you're not able to get on the wireless network, then they're basically a box. There's nothing that you would be able to do on them. So while they're one solution of many, and which is why we're right now continuing to purchase the laptop systems and put the 6-seat systems in, so that we have that base solid foundation of those devices before we move on devices that have limitations.
I may continue. Mr. Hernandez and I were on have been on, and we still are on the Facility and Technology Committee. Over the last 6 months, we've visited all the sites. We took in the good, the bad, the ugly. And on March 20th, if I'm not mistaken, we have about a 3-hour workshop where we will discuss the issues that we discovered and the costs that were presented to us. We have quite a task ahead of us with that, on whether or not the district will more than likely try to go out for a bond, if we should, when we should, why we should. There's a lot of questions that I had many call me concerning this, and I said, you know, there's a workshop, all the numbers are not in, the breakdowns are not in, it's a workshop. I don't know if the public's invited.
Always to a
The
workshop.
public is always invited. So that will be quite interesting. So I look forward to March 20th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Johnston.
Let me think. I can remember what it was. Couple things. I know I continue to attend the parent meetings for the ELS, local control federal funding, and what I hear from parents is really interesting. We did have one in elementary school, and I forget which one now, where the Hispanic father who didn't speak English, but he did ask for help from parents, for parents in helping their children, and also in that translation, he was looking forward to advance himself also and other parents. And in talking to the principal of that school, I remember he does actually reach out to parents, and they can come in and use a laptop and go into Parent Connect, and he encourages the parents to do that, and he's really really hands-on with his parents, is trying to tell them how they can be involved. So that was impressive. Now I feel bad that I didn't remember which elementary school that was. But and the other thing, I was privileged to be a part of a few people who interviewed our Interact kids for camp. Our not Interact kids, our select students to go to the Rotary camp. And we, out of each high school, I think there was like 20 candidates about, and then we actually only interviewed 6. And they are wonderful kids. They're just wonderful kids. And it's really hard to pick, and it's really hard to not be able to send all of them. And one of them was such a fireball over at Patriot High, Miss Ortiz. She had come over from her science project, the science fair. She had aquanautics or something like that. Anyway, and it was something about fish, and I don't know what else. But anyway, she was just awesome. She's on the council. She's in every club. She invented a club. She talked about the environment in school, what she was going to do about it. She was going to meet with the principal and have an active kindness week and talk to the principal about how they could implement that, and if she could get the permission to do that. And, oh, that's so super. So we did ask the students, if you could change your high school, what would you do? And what would you ask for? And that was her comment. And then another student said they would like to see more honors classes because they're somewhere between the college AP class and the other classes, and they would like to see that. But I just didn't say much about it, but I was thinking, with Common Core, it's almost like all of them will be honors classes someday. So anyway, I guess that's, I know something we'll be talking about when we get to our plan, is what kinds of courses and programs we'll be offering. But I'm really enjoying that when I have an opportunity to actually see what parents have to say in the schools. And the principals are wonderful too. And the campuses are clean. And I think we have a lot to be proud of. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hernandez.
Too many things. First of all, I want to thank staff for the good work that they do in trying to educate me especially on the things of the district. I had a lengthy conversation with Mrs. Ford this morning on E-rate and basic concepts of how things are being done, and she walked me through it just like I need to be walked. And but I appreciate all that staff does to go ahead and try to do those things to educate me especially. Second, I appreciate Ms. Sandy Montry and her presentation. I think she runs a very difficult program, but her heart's in it. And I think the thing is, for what she did today is she's just giving us the numbers. If we would take this one day and go out with her and see the things that she does, to try to motivate and try to educate and try to communicate and try to get people on board, we'd be very astounded at, does she have that much time in a day, even to live her own life? And she has really invested a lot of time and effort in trying to ensure that these young people get a good education. Another announcement I want to make is that Jurupa Valley Chamber of Commerce is having their annual golf scholarship event on March 14th. And if there's anybody out there that wants to play golf and help us earn money to go ahead and give scholarships at the high schools, and we'd appreciate it. And if you have any raffle gifts, we'll take those too. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to congratulate all of the science fair participants and winners, and good luck to those that are moving on to county. Lots going on, but I can't think of anything at the moment that didn't.
The fair. Don't forget the fair.
Oh yes, the Indio Fair is going on right now, and we've got lots of FFA students from Jurupa Valley and Rubidoux there, and they would appreciate if you need meat that you go on Saturday and bid on their animals. And with that, thank you all for coming out tonight, and we will see you on March 17th at Patriot, and we are adjourned.